It's related to my PhD research, but it's just like an isolated text that I wrote in some months ago, and it's not part of any formal project. And so I'll just read and then we can. Okay. Between 1919 and COVID-19, some thoughts on political change. The shining land of our youth, Kurt Tucholsky wrote in November 1919, sinks away. The First War had left more than 2 million Germans dead, almost 3 million with mutilated bodies, more than 1 million orphans and widows. In the last months of war, the Spanish flu infected soldiers and field doctors, expanding the specter of death. Prostrate, mourning Germans, especially German women, would still face years of hyperinflation, revolutions followed by political assassinations, chaos and social distress in an accelerated loss of pre-war reality. What we loved, Tucholsky concluded, has become luxury. And luxury could be a warm bed or a piece of butter. Tucholsky also spoke of hope, or to wait, the most beautiful thing, asking small merchants, teachers, workers, artisans to hold on. They would face a more difficult and decisive battle than the Battle of Verdun. In the following years, during the reconstruction of societies, economies, and political communities in Germany, Tucholsky tried to combat habits and values that had led Europe to the violence of 1914-1918. With newspaper sheets, he waged war on war. He summoned Germans to admire freedom and equality instead of decorations and army parades. He inspired them to work with each other, not over each other. 10 years after the end of the war in 1928, the magazine Literarische Welt invited Tucholsky and other writers to answer what they would do if they governed the country. Tucholsky's answer was to abolish the army, pass land reform, socialize the economy, reform the judiciary, schools, and universities. He concluded the list by saying that these goals were mocked today just because they're the truth of tomorrow. At home during the pandemic, I read his words from the 1920s and think about 2020. Like 100 years ago, workers and teachers wait and try to have faith without knowing what, without grasping the conditions of future months or years. Like Tucholsky, many writers and scientists talk about realities of tomorrow. In March, the magazine Politico published an article with predictions from more than 30 researchers. According to some of them, post-COVID-19 world will have declining polarization, a new type of patriotism, healthier digital lifestyles, and internet elections. Forbes predicted more artificial intelligence, telemedicine, and online shopping, while experts published by Foreign Policy anticipated a less free world and an end to globalization. Two psychology professors predicted the end of handshakes and casual hugs, and the writer Michel Houellebecq told a French radio station that the world would be the same, only worse. Today, a reader isn't sure whether journalists, specialists, and writers predict or hope, whether they say it will be like this or it could be like this. Indeed, most predictions seem to deduce the future from the present, or more accurately, they bet on a future that will unfold from actual trends. In the tomorrow described by carriers of knowledge who know societies, it seems that we will suffer the result of impersonal forces, of material circumstances acting as rulers, of gigantic power sitting on the engine of history. Under these conditions, the verbs to hope, believe, to wait are rendered meaningless. You are inspired to conform, to find joy in what was enacted without our participation, to survive and preach survival, for it is what it is. The new coronavirus only increased the sense of helplessness. It was a sudden intrusion of a non-human reality, a new biological process, forcing an undesired reorganization of social and political life. Perhaps all these future scenarios sold by expert magazines have only a psychological function, to calm us down, save us from disorientation, put some teleological order into the mess we find ourselves, and stop thinking. The way one speaks about human realities has political or depoliticizing implications. I mentioned the verb wait, which in Portuguese, esperar, is related to esperança, hope, and opens itself to two opposite attitudes, passivity and activity. One can simply wait passively, suffering reality, or waiting for utopian reconfigurations. Or one can wait with hope, accepting unpredictability, the tragic aspect of life, without giving up participation. Politically, this means understanding power not as control or command, but as responding. An active waiting can also open space for an examination of what you're going through. If you're freed from necessary trends, you're also free to think and judge without a schematic future form that constrains our imagination. I've chosen Tucholsky as an example, for he was not an ideologue, did not follow any party line. He once said he would not give the communists the privilege of expelling him from the party. He was not a scholar, the professors who can prove anything. He was a political writer who tried to enlarge the imagination of his readers. Indeed, he was many writers, 5 pseudonyms, for he believed his readers would not understand how a serious analyst and a satirist could be the same person, and who used his typing machine to avoid a catastrophe, as one of his contemporaries noted. He also belonged to that undefinable group of pariahs, modern prophets, like Heinrich Heine and Joseph Roth, whose criteria for judgment was not arbitrary, nor theoretical, not even coherent, but displayed a unique, acute sensitivity to their present-day realities. By standing outside intellectual fashions and social conventions, outside party or movement lines, they could protect their vantage on what reality was, and this enabled them to resist it, thus imagining different realities. They played with a double purpose of political writing, establishing and destroying. Some of them, standing between war fever and interwar nationalistic resentment, tried to establish the evident. Everyone is killing and being killed, Joseph Roth observed in 1923. They captured the worst tendencies of their times and amplified them in poetic documentations of reality, like the nightmares Heine had when he tried to sleep and thought of Germany, or when he opened a box containing the future of his country, a future that he promised not to tell, but could only say, "Oh, the smell." The reality in which Tucholsky lived was organized around the worship of authority and the God war. Therefore, if he could govern his reality, he would reform a judiciary impregnated with the values of militarism and imperialism. He wanted to prevent his time from continuing to dance the old dance of political violence. If someone asked me how the future would be, I would say, I don't know, but I would rather abolish nationalism, not nations or nationalities, reform the economy, or alternatives cannot be just between the freedom of markets or the plans of politburos. Adopt an ecological humanism, Wuhan's wet markets are just another case of violation of nature, and revolutionize political power. Public spaces are not public if monopolized by lobbyists, professional politicians, and authoritarian leaders. But my point here is not to offer my detailed answer. It is to reframe the question about tomorrow from it will be to it can be. If we learn and teach powerlessness, we, paraphrasing Hannah Arendt, end up extracting the worst aspects of the status quo. So the problem is not inaction in itself, but a sense of political insignificance that actively supports what is constituted, affirming its self-destructive cycles. In 1919, Tucholsky wrote the poem Make War on War, Krieg dem Kriege, in which he lamented the lack of debate and action against militarism, and no one dared to protest. If Germany did not change, he warned in the last lines, new nationalists will be born, and in 20 years, new canons will be on the way. 20 years later, in 1939, new canons were on the way to Poland. Tucholsky's books and poems had already been banned by 1933. He killed himself in an overdose of sleeping pills in 1935 in his Swedish exile. A few years later, Joseph Roth would be the same, with alcoholism collapsing in a hotel's bar in Paris after hearing the news of the suicide of his friend Anne Stoller in New York. Seeing their political realities continuing to dance their destructive dances, they despaired and somehow prophetically too committed suicide, to not witness the extermination of their wives, relatives, ethnic peers, and the suicide of Europe. But before, with courage, they expressed their vision for an amended world, for they believed they had hope, that beautiful thing in political change. Their example stands.
Thank you very much. This was beautifully written and said. Okay, Yernea, are you just clapping, or do you want to ask a question? Oh, you're clapping. Okay, I get confused with these. So, do we have anyone from Zoom who would like to engage Rafael in a conversation, debate, questions, anything? Yernea, okay. Anyone else?
I have just one remark. Thank you for being very poetically.
Yes.
Well, thank you, thank you.
I agree. Thank you, Rafael.
Me too.
Thank you.
And maybe I can ask one question or make a little remark.
Okay, is there anyone also from the room who would like to engage Rafael on this?
Yeah, a little remark.
Just 1 second, please. No one. Okay, so I guess then Ringo and Helgar, you go.
I think it would be worthwhile to add Klausmann to these protagonists of your thinking, because he killed himself as well, and I think he suffered kind of the same emotions like Tucholsky and Joseph wrote, and he knew them very, very good. But he experienced the kind of the new world with the end of the Second World War and a new German and a new Europe. But this doesn't, beziehungsweise he kills himself instead, so, or otherwise. So it's like he could have the ability to live in kind of a new world, to experience a political change, but he was kind of so frustrated that this doesn't mean anything to him in a way. So that's.
Yeah, thank you very much. You have a very interesting recommendation. Yeah.
I mean, his diaries are very good to read, and they are very good. So
yeah, I think he was in conversation also with Arthur Zweig, and also like this. Yeah, actually, there's so many interesting figures.
It's very impressive how Klausmann describes how the people died around him. So lots of friends commit suicide. Joseph wrote has a big part in his diaries, and others too. So like Ernst Toller. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, no, also what was interesting for me about Tucholsky and Roth in a way is that they were perceiving reality before, like this, what I mentioned as a prophetic element. So they were not only thinking afterwards what happened, but they were sensing it, and yeah. But thank you very much for the recommendation. I'll check it.
Okay, thank you, Ringo. I guess now it's Helga's.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rafael. I just have two small commentaries or what came into my mind when I listened to you. And the first is how important it is, how important speeches or words are, and the way we speak about what we experience. And Arendt, she herself makes this very clear in her essay on Bertolt Brecht, and more general, the poets frame the words we need to. They help us to illuminate the world. So that's the one thing, and the other is what also came into my mind is promises. What's the title? Introduction into Politics. There is a small 3 or 4 pages at the end of the book where it is about how survive the desert, or the way how what Arendt brings, as far as I remember, in how important friendships, family relations, being together with others are if there are no other possibilities open. And this somehow, this COVID-19 situation somehow throws, as I experience this, throws us back into private relationships, which we have never chosen or experienced. At least I have never experienced that in this degree. So I just wanted to mention this at the end of the book, how where we get somehow energy from to manage the desert without accepting it or without adjusting to the desert. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Helga.
Should I comment now, or?
If you want to, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Helga. And yeah, this the role of words, maybe, I don't know if it's outdated or not now, with different forms, like different languages, but I think, yeah, it's very interesting. And also that these writers, they were writing in different styles, like I also mentioned Heine, like journalism, poetry, political criticism, and so this also, I think, that helped to address reality in different ways with this enlarged imagination. And yeah, I think that the remark about our changing situations, like with COVID now, I mentioned this waiting, so as a form of so it's not acting right now, but it's like waiting as also an opportunity to think, and yeah, interesting about this. Leaving the private as a form of resource to I don't know, to move on or to wait. And yeah, thank you very much.
And we have lost a no. Just give her a second to come.
Hello, thank you. I mean, I also admire this poetic approach to thinking about politics, which you already presented last year as well, so with your story. And my question is regarding, things that you spoke about, and the question of, losing the word as we would wish to have it or live in it, etc. Would you consider, like, I don't know, if we take, Walter Benjamin's case or Primo Levi's case, who resisted for a long time, but at the end he also committed a suicide. And would you consider a suicide as a political statement or act? So how do you think about this? Because usually suicide is considered from the very mainstream point of view, also, within the Christian tradition, etc., as a expression of weakness of the person who committed it. So, and that's something, where people just give up on themselves, on the word, etc., etc. I would want to know, what do you think about this? Is it anything political in it?
Thank you very much, Lasse. It's I think in We Refugees Aren't complained somehow that this Austrian Jews were killing themselves without making any political statement. They're just going home and sometimes without leaving notes, and I think also that the example of Primo Levi is interesting, because I just read recently about those who did not survive their survival. So this relates also to the question of Hingo, like believing in a new reality, but not not finding any meaning and in it. And yeah, also I think another thing that comes to my mind is here when I'm working as a tour guide here in Berlin, when we visit like the Stumbling Stones here, probably you know the project, and so I thought that in some cases, like older stones, you can still read that some people self-murder themselves, like in the German term, and in some cases, like especially the newer stones, it's written that they escape towards death. And I think this is a more accurate political statement that they couldn't find, as a Jewish leader said in that context, that for many refugees, the globe was divided between places where they couldn't leave and places that wouldn't accept them. So it was a last possibility of acting in this sense. And even also contradicting Judaism, like Judaism also like forbids suicide. But I think that it can be, and in many cases was a political act, very aware of external reality, and so not out of individual subjective frustration, but in being aware of what was going on, and then deciding to stop their individual lives.
Jasper's calling it Freital, expression of Freital.
Asta says that, I don't know if you heard her. Did you hear her?
Fight, like liberation?
In death, yeah. Liberating death, I guess. And now, no more. Okay, now we have Nikita only. Last but not least.
Just to say what Vlasta said.
Freital, it's not liberation. It's about free to choose the death. It's freedom.
It's freedom to choose death. Yeah.
So it's the opposite of liberation. Not liberation from life, but being free to choose the death.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to say another author, when Vlasta was saying authors, if you know Jean Amery, okay, he's a Holocaust survivor who theorized about suicide, committed a suicide. So I think it will be good.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And yeah, also I didn't want I've chosen to end the text with that note, like, but not to be pessimistic, but also to show the tragic aspect of action, and thinking about acting and thinking about future. So there's this possibility of failure, but also emphasizing that these authors were very present and very aware of their political realities. But yeah, thank you for all those suggestions.
Thank you.